Dragon's Rising Season 3 Part 2 was a very enjoyable season. It made me feel some of the highest highs in all of Ninjago. But the reasons I enjoyed it is where the problem starts. It has very little to do with the primary plotline of the season. The season starts off with two different plotlines. One has Sora, Eren, and Raz trying to get to the underworld and stumbling upon these horrific attacks across the town in Mysterium, where people start randomly floating in the air. The sound design for the instrument being played to signify the beginning of a soul raid sends absolute chills down your spine, since we very quickly learn that there's nothing to be done but watch people get their souls drained once you hear it.
They've come back to finish the job.
I also really like the animation on the prismatic view, which they use once they learn how to integrate the prismatic steel into a lantern. This filter is used a lot throughout the season and really helps the atmosphere and also give us some really cool shots that they wouldn't be able to do in any other context. One thing that I did find very frustrating is that in part 1 of season 3, Eren uses his jet alongside the other ninja to fly towards the fight with Thunderfang, then for some reason only uses the drone jet for the actual battle, which is clearly weaker than a fully weaponized jet. And then we know this drone got damaged by Noct, but we also know he drove the jet to the final battle, so why didn't they just take the jet and travel in part 2 of the season? These bikes have no reason to exist, and a jet would be even faster at the end of the day. It gets even sillier towards the end of the season because Sora actually makes Lloyd's jet out of these bikes using her tech powers, but it would have made even more sense for Sora to take Eren's jet and simply upgrade it instead of making this behemoth of a military jet with 3 tiny bikes. Also, on a side note, it makes no sense for Sora to be in an outfit that perfectly aligns with the rest of the team that she has had no contact with. Generally, I don't care or ask for suit explanations anymore. I think we're way past that. But I think the best way to do it if they can't explain an outfit change is to just change the ninja at the beginning of a season. It's a lot more jarring to me when they change midway for no reason, like the storm suits. So I prefer what they did here, with most of them having their new outfits from the get-go. However, when the outfit changes start to add holes to the plot, like Sora's outfit here, then I will call it out no matter how many times it happens. Just because this is a normal issue for Ninjago, it doesn't mean we should be okay with it. Before we move on to more critical points, a quick side note regarding animation is that the season also fixes the overuse of electricity and lightning effects to a certain extent. I've had a major problem with so many powers doing the whole glowy hands and lightning thing. It's super cool when reserved for specific characters, but quickly becomes old and uninspired when they do it for everyone. This trend inhibits us from getting iconic visuals like Lloyd's energy ball, or even Raz turning all red when he gets enraged, which is proof that Ninjago can still do some very different and interesting things. This season had this blur effect on the reveal blades as they swing it around, and Xanth evolving with a pink swirl, which was all a drastic push in the right direction visually. All I want is a little creativity here. Anyways, on the flip side, we're also kicking off pretty intensely with the ninja racing to Evalt's monastery before he passes. I was honestly very shocked that Ninjago did this. I knew it was coming at some point with the wasting dragon sickness foreshadowing, but I didn't really expect it to be so soon. His final speech and him finally going motionless is such an emotionally painful scene to watch. It's a scene about how one's legacy makes death much more graceful, but it also sends a dagger to the heart knowing Eren and Sora weren't there, which definitely feels like a gut punch, as Evalt seems to have wanted to make amends with Eren one last time before he died. It definitely makes you feel more tension towards Eren and Sora's decision to be with Raz. They also set up how Eren is meant to be the greatest ninja, which means even more coming from a pessimistic dragon like Evalt.
As a teacher, I was hardest on Eren. Not because of his failings, but because he had the most potential of any ninja.
And lastly, I've said this before, but Season 3 itself has a very strong theme of life, death, and the cycle of life. This scene, alongside many others in this season, are all working together to make that theme as strong as possible. After that emotionally painful scene, we realize that the hurt is far from over as Zayn is leaving the team with Pixel. We have Lloyd feeling guilty about the team seemingly growing apart under his leadership. The show uses Zayn's departure with Pixel as kind of a double-edged sword. It adds depth and consequence to the Master Lloyd character arc because the team was extremely tight-knit when Master Wu is around, but most importantly, it gives the opportunity for Zayn to come back in a much better way whenever they bring him back, because he was growing a bit stagnant, just chilling in the monastery for the past few seasons. If the writers do it right, they can use his adventures across the merged lands as a way to give Zayn leverage in the story and make him go through something that could potentially give him a solid character arc when he comes back. The best example of a ninja that was able to grow because of a similar situation is Jay. He may have come much later in the storyline, yet he's had so much more growth and importance to the plot than some of the other main ninja who returned faster, because of the fact that he had all these experiences in the administration and training with Raz that gave him a ton of storytelling leverage to work with. They do something similar with Cole, since he leaves on his own excursions a lot, and so in that same vein, Zayn leaving makes me hopeful for the character to finally go in the right direction. Speaking of Jay, my boy is back. The show knows we're as desperate for as much Jay screen time as possible, and boy do they do it right. It's kind of funny because he feels more like Jay from the original seasons of Ninjago without his memories and goodness shattered than he ever did in the more recent seasons of Ninjago before Dragon's Rising. A lot of it has to do with his voice not being as squeaky anymore and more in line with the deeper tone he used earlier on.
Like how good I'm gonna look in green? Isn't it obvious I'm gonna be the green ninja? The color obviously suits me.
I'm definitely gonna need to wash my boxer shorts again.
I will love you forever, Nia.
And his brutal honesty and rudeness towards the rest of the ninja team often feels like a twisted version of his pessimistic crash outs that a lot of us Ninjago fans loved him so much for.
How about one of our awesome dragons? Oh, I forgot. They took off and left us high and dry. Or hey, what about our golden weapons, which will do nothing against a snake that size?
And I'm not going to your stupid monastery. Normal people don't just have monasteries. It's weird.
Jay not only returned literally in the show, but also returned to form as a character and reminded me as to why he's been my favorite ninja all these years. His relationship with Nia is also much more well defined. They go through a series of events, ultimately leading to Jay realizing that despite everything, there's something clearly special in his heart that he feels for Nia, which was such a clever way of not redeeming Jay too quickly, but also giving us as the audience something satisfying to end the season with. Since while an interconnected story with ongoing mysteries is super entertaining, there does need to be some sense of conclusion and resolution between each and every season. And besides, Nia and Jay's relationship has been spotty at best, and how they feel about each other has been a bit skewed in the past. However, this season makes use of their hard reset to clearly define their dynamic and make me really feel like they're a married couple that's going through a pretty rough patch. Again, quite ironic that Jay lost his memory, and now of all time is when his relationship and personality has been defined better than ever before. Also, the mech dragon rider he acquires was animated really well. The rigging on the model was just stellar and made for super dynamic movements and action scenes. Even the way it walks casually is elegant. Yes, it's mechanical, yet it moves so fluidly. Easily worth the $75 I paid for it in real life, and really hope to see it comes back in the next season for a couple more action sequences at least. Simultaneously, as all this is going on, we also have one more plotline of Kai, Cole, Frak, and Ryu training in the monastery. It's an interesting group of ninja to put together, and I appreciate getting some Kai and Cole buddy action going. I will say though, while I enjoy the more casual story with Ryu learning spinjitzu from the newly moved in Rantu, and Frak training with the Finders and the Ninja in the Land of the Lost Things, the transitions between these and the rest of the plot lines were a bit jarring and random sometimes. There's one I remembered clearly where we're investigating why someone went missing in the Land of Lee, and then all of a sudden we transition to Ryu and Rantu messing around in Creel's junkyard for literally 60 seconds, and then proceed to go back to what we're doing in Lee. This does get fixed as the season goes on. Cole, Kai, and Frak unearth an entire dead source dragon. Most of the Finders get hollowed out, and that's when the transitions get a lot smoother, since every storyline matches up in intensity, and they're all fighting the same threat, just in different areas of the merged lands. Apart from transitions, which is a pretty minor issue for me, the actual storyline here is very good. I'm so glad that the bit where Cole went exploring with Master Wu came back. Ninjago, as we know, is great at setting amazing mysteries and plot lines up, but usually not good at wrapping those up. So it was really nice to see the Screaming Earth plotline have a really satisfying answer, being the dead source dragon of balance being buried deep underground. It was definitely one of those questions that me personally as a fan was probably most excited to see the answer of, and I can happily say I wasn't disappointed. All this results in a really cool action scene where Cole, Frack, and Kai just go absolutely insane with their powers, trying to bring this thing to the surface. It's genuinely chilling to see Cole and Frack try to use their powers, but then flinch out because of the screams. Super unsettling and dark for Ninjago.
The feeling's so strong here. The earth itself is crying out. This has to be where it's coming from.
I can't wait to see how an entire Source Dragon was killed, especially since this season establishes that the Source Dragon of Balance kept the rest of the council unified, meaning whoever did this is trying to do as much damage as possible to the council. I love the parallel story of Lloyd learning about balance as we find out it's dead. It elevates the moment because we actually learn about how generous the Source Dragon of Balance was and how this dragon was integral to the story of the first Spinjitzu Master and mortals having powers.
We all recall it was a split until the Source Dragon of Balance favored the mortals and became the deciding vote.
Now there's a reason to care other than the fact that yes, Source Dragons are important from a general perspective. Also, all this lore regarding the first and his story with the Source Dragons is insanely awesome to learn about. We've all had these questions as fans for so long, and these are all surprisingly consistent, valid, and interesting answers to a franchise that never really planned to have Source Dragons or anyone really give powers to the first Spinjitzu Master in the first place. The writers have a good grip on how to retcon things in the show properly to merge the past and future seamlessly. Back to the Land of the Lost Things, however, soon after this somber excursion, the gang goes to Imperium where there's another spectral attack going on. Here we meet Percival doing what he can to protect, which is a good example of how to have a returning side character, which we'll discuss later in the video. That'll make sense as to why I say this is a good example, because there are bad examples in this season. In the heat of all this battle, this is where Cole ends up making a move with anger-filled judgment, which eventually gets his soul sucked out before Kai and Frack could finish making the reveal blade and start beating the spectral Dragonians. Now, I've heard a lot of people don't like this, and personally, I disagree with why fans complain about this. So basically, for context, people have been saying that Cole seems to love the Finders more than the ninja for a while, since he prioritizes and connects with them for most of Dragon's Rising. And to that I say that Cole actually makes perfect sense. In the real world, we all have our own families that we grow up with, but depending on where you are in life, you also find a special partner and your own set of people to take care of that rely on you. Eventually what happens is you end up spending more time with your partner and kids because different kinds of love come with different kinds of responsibility. But that doesn't mean you love the family you grew up with any less. In Cole's case, the ninja are basically his original family. He loves Wu, Kai, Zayn, Jay, and the gang more than anything. But while he would put his life on the line for them without a second thought, all of these guys can handle themselves. Meanwhile, the Finders are an adopted family for him, and they heavily rely on Cole. This is the family that Cole has made and therefore will be more worried and concerned about since they are more vulnerable and place so much faith in him for their safety and well-being. Which is why it makes sense to me that when the two kids and Bonzel get their souls sucked out, Cole ends up making some very rash decisions that he usually wouldn't make in Imperium. Not only does he feel like he failed these people who relied on him, but two kids were hurt in the process too. And it's a lot worse when kids are involved and hurt in any situation. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from regarding that scene and what they've been doing with Cole in general. Now, going through the entire season and summarizing my thoughts, there's two major plot lines that I've intentionally left out, and they're both the best and worst parts of the season. So starting off with the negative, let's get this straight. In part 1, we see Thunderfang being defeated by the Ark Dragon in this epic battle. Apparently, he devoured many Oni, hence his corrupted nature and unnatural look. Super cool. And then throughout the season, we get banger lines like this.
But we have a deal to make with you.
The ego, the entitlement. You remind me of my young self.
Which let us see more into his thought process. And finally, we learn that he wants to ascend to the council and destroy the council. All of this is very interesting. And then after Eren beats him in a very powerful climax, he goes to the Spectral Lands where he stays in the same place saying things we already know regarding ascending to the council for an entire season. Which I guess is fine, but then after he acquires the powers he needs, he gets beat by the Ark Dragon without ever achieving anything. I remember being so worried and hyped at the end of part 1 because here we have a dragon powered by souls in a place where he has access to unlimited souls. This is going to be so bad for the ninja. But all we did to him was listen to him rant about source dragons for an entire season like some drunk uncle in the corner until this hypothetical uncle died of liver cancer. There is actually no way Thunderfang got defeated 3 times without ever achieving anything. It makes him so much less scary and incompetent. And the best part is, 2 of those times were by the same Ark Dragon, which doesn't feel right to me because Thunderfang was almost at Source Dragon levels of power the 3rd time, and the Ark Dragon had no significant upgrades, so it shouldn't have been able to beat Thunderfang exactly the same way it did the 1st time, right? The way I would have fixed this is if you really do need Thunderfang to be farming souls for an entire season, like if that's very important for the plotline, then instead of showing us that the entire season, just cut to flashbacks on what made him really interesting in the first place as all this is happening. Show us his story on how he was a general and slowly got corrupted and why he hates the council throughout the season. It would have played well into the themes the season already had regarding the source dragons and how they're not as generous and noble as we thought them to be when we eavesdrop on them in Lloyd's vision. We literally could have gotten Anakin Skywalker betraying the council of the Jedi, but a Ninjago, as a dragon.
It's unfair. How can you be on the council and not be a master?
Take a seat, young Skywalker.
And then one more change I'd make is that Thunderfang would be able to make it up to the council and do some damage before being defeated this time. And come to think of it now, it really looks like the writers tried every way in a desperate attempt to keep Thunderfang locked to this one season, which is why nothing he did really impacts the greater story. Even though the idea of a dragon trying to ascend to the council of the source dragons feels like it would probably be involved in the greater overarching story of Dragons Rising. See, if the Forbidden Five were the only villains and Thunderfang was never a thing, like originally planned, that wouldn't have been a problem since they're a much more grounded threat and work well as a contained story within Dragons Rising to serve as a mid-show finale before the next season start ramping up the greater plot. But Thunderfang just can't be that mid-show finale villain because in order for him to work, he needs to damage the council. But that would make him more involved with the larger plotline for Dragons Rising, but he can't do that because the writers have other plans for the major plotline of Ninjago Dragons Rising, and I'm guessing Thunderfang just doesn't fit in that grand puzzle. So in the end, both Thunderfang and the Forbidden Five failed as villains because Thunderfang stole their screen time and ability to do anything evil to live up to their own names. Now the Ark Dragon does come back and it's a mixed bag. It is pretty epic to see its sheer size, and summoning it does seem to have consequences for elemental powers moving forward since it angers some of the source dragons. But the dialogue between Lloyd and Aaron when they control it is pretty weird because they start forcing the word focus into their sentences to line up with the theme of focus. I get they're trying to have this duality of focus and chaos, but it wasn't set up at all and sounds way too cheesy and close to this commercial.
Ready, focus, go!
Also, when I realized they had to play music to summon the Ark Dragon, I was really excited, since mixing the soundtrack with things that are actually happening is such a cool idea. Scenes like Frack and Sora singing together as the background soundtrack syncs is so cool. I rewatched it countless times.
From the one, please. Da, 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 da.
But then it just didn't hit when they actually summoned the Ark Dragon because one side of it is birds screeching and the soundtrack feels like it's doing its own thing.
Stop! Ugh! If my ears weren't attached to my head, they'd be running away.
I'd say switch out the birds for something else that could have supported the music better, or change the soundtrack to match the scenario. Either or works. Speaking of music, when the ninjas split up to go on their side quest to free the Ark Dragon, Nia's ocean theme plays as Jay reveals that he hasn't changed and he still wants to leave. It really took me out of it, and I think a new soundtrack was in order here. Either make a sad version of Jay and Nia's theme, or a completely new soundtrack that plays to represent Jay's betrayal. Now before we get to the best part of the season, there's one last thing we need to talk about. Remember how I was talking about how Percival was a good example of returning side characters in the show and how this season had some pretty bad examples? It's time to talk about that. Now usually I like them, like when Sora's side of the team goes to Ericor in order to awaken one half of the Ark Dragon. It's nice to see Ninjago develop and side characters not just drop to never show up again. Dragons Rising has been pretty good with how they handle side characters. However, sometimes they take it too far to the point where the world starts to feel a lot smaller. For example, Aaron and Sora run into Gandalaria when trying to find Mysterium, which is crazy since Mysterium is a whole realm, but a realm starts to feel really small when you keep running into the same person. It's like if every time the ninja went to Ninjago City, they ran into Princess Vanya or something. Now, Candelaria is fine, and I can chalk it up to coincidence, but then to make it worse, remember Power Lid from the Realm of the Oni and Dragon from part 1? Yeah, Nia somehow runs into him in Mysterium, of all places, guarding the cave of the second half of the Ark Dragon, and Power Lid and Candelaria are best friends. How small is Mysterium if we keep running into the same people, and most of all, people from other realms that weren't even there in the first place? For context, think about Ninjago side characters. Would it make sense to you if the ninja constantly ran into Benthomar or Okino all the time? No. It would only make sense if Ninjago was like a small town or something. And that's why I say when you have proper reasons for side characters returning, like Rapton hunting dragons, Dorama trapping people, visiting Ericor, Creel offering her junkyard for training, all that can be justified. Although Rapton is up for debate, since you could argue that they really shouldn't be running into him all the time since there's treasure all over the merged lands. It only makes sense when they're hunting dragons. But anyways, I digress. I'm okay with it, to be honest. When you just have completely random run-ins though, with characters across the merged lands, it really feels like the world is a lot smaller than the merge makes it out to be. It feels more like different cities merging together than actual different worlds colliding. Kind of takes some magic and grandness out of it, because think about this, just to give you an idea for scale. Ninjago alone has the main city, Dark Island, Merlopia, Shintaro, the island, and so many more regions, just to name a few. It's huge. Now apply that to every other realm. See how big things really are, and see why we really shouldn't be running into Power Lid of all things here. Anyways, now time to get to the best part of the season. Play the music.
In the land of Lee, look around and see all your happiness can be found.
The Lee subplot was everything it needed to be. Jay takes us there in order to find Aaron's parents, and we soon learn that Lee has been lying to all the inhabitants here that the world outside is destroyed. There's this facade of a perfect suburban world with perfectly happy people that occasionally disappear and come back differently if they ever have second thoughts about Lee, and it is so creepy. There's just something about how real Lee is as a person that we can easily imagine in real life that makes him genuinely scary. We also got a musical number which felt like I was watching a Disney movie in the best way possible. And we also find out Lee was the one who made the fake gravestones, so no one came looking for these missing people. Jay and Nia were given some amazing scenes during this whole ruse to be able to develop their bumpy relationship forward. And as Aaron comes to say goodbye to his parents at their burial site one last time, as he's finally given up on resurrecting his parents since he still thinks they're dead, the two storylines start coming together, and I cannot describe to you the feeling that I had when I realized Aaron, Sora, the ninja, and his parents were all going to be in the same place. It happens so organically that you don't see it coming at first, but then you're like, oh wait, they're going to the graveyard. That's where everyone else is. And then we get it. The scene where Aaron meets his parents and they get to see how much their boy has grown. Aaron's able to do spinjitzu in front of them just like he wanted to, and this scene is everything I could have ever asked for or wished for. The Lee arc of the season did not feel like Ninjago, and I think that's good. It felt so fresh and new, and I'm glad they spent a good amount of time there. Even the animators seem to have made so many new assets and buildings to make this unique experience. It ended up being the most intense and scariest part of the seasons, which is interesting since Lee was able to feel more threatening than a dragon of chaos. He accomplishes what he wants, which is to keep people around to cure his loneliness of being the only person in his realm, which is a step above Thunderfang having never done the thing he set out to do. That and Lord Raz doing his thing throughout the season are top tier content. Lord Raz and his journey forging Source Dragon icons, Aaron choosing Sora over resurrecting his family, and finally being able to get past that one move where he got slammed down the last 2 times, as well as Raz trapping the ninja through the merged lands, is also peak. But I don't really have much to say on that until we see where it goes, where I can finally like develop my final thoughts. So until then, I can just like gush about this for an hour or say things that you probably heard from like many other Ninjago reviewers out there already. And speaking of Lee, just a quick little theory. I have a feeling that the first Spinjitzu Master made a set of realms, right? And I'm guessing most of those realms are like the ones with humans in them. So maybe Lee was like one of the realms he made, but he never got to finish it, which is maybe why Lee was the only person there. And finally, guys, let's stop hating on Frack. He's super funny, and when you're that young, you get crushes like Frack crushing on Sora for no reason at all. It's so random when he chooses to go starstruck head over heels, and it is hilarious. He brings this brand new kind of nonchalant, try-hard humor to Ninjago. That is all for my review on Dragon's Rising Season 3 Part 2. Thank you so much for making it all this way, and make sure to stick around for future videos as we have more discussion videos planned for the future that I'm very excited to release to you guys. And as usual, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.